The gleaming corridors of Centrium hummed with activity as Captain Ezra Douglas strode purposefully towards the briefing room. His heavy boots echoed against the polished floor, a rhythmic counterpoint to the soft whir of machinery that permeated the massive space station. Centrium, the crown jewel of the Orion civilization, hung in space like a shimmering star, its billion inhabitants going about their daily lives in this bastion of human achievement. Ezra's eyes, a startling shade of violet that marked him as a member of the ruling Douglas clan, scanned the faces of passing civilians. They smiled and nodded respectfully, pride evident in their expressions at the sight of an Orion super-heavy infantryman. His armor, a marvel of engineering that added nearly a foot to his already impressive height, gleamed under the soft ambient lighting. As he approached the briefing room, Ezra's squad fell in behind him. There was Lex Orion, the team's tech specialist, his fingers constantly twitching, as if longing for a keyboard. Jazz Rigel, demolitions expert, her cropped hair dyed a shocking pink that contrasted sharply with her serious expression. Thomas Bellatrix, the squad's medic, walked with the quiet confidence of a man who had patched up his comrades under heavy fire more times than he cared to count. Rounding out the team was Kira Sirius, their sharpshooter, eyes constantly scanning their surroundings, even in the safety of Centrium. The briefing room doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a holographic display of a distant planet slowly rotating in the center of the room. Admiral Lyra Douglas, Ezra's aunt and current head of Orion's military operations, stood beside it, her weathered face set in grim lines. "At ease, soldiers," she said as the team snapped to attention. "We've got a situation that requires the unique talents of our super-heavy infantry." Ezra felt a surge of pride. The Orion super-heavy infantry were the best of the best, capable of adapting to any situation and emerging victorious. Their mechanized suits were the pinnacle of Orion technology, a perfect fusion of man and machine. Admiral Lyra gestured to the holographic planet. "This is Methox IV, home to a primitive alien species that has been causing problems for our mining operations in the sector. Your mission is simple: subjugate the natives and secure the planet for Orion interests."
Lex raised an eyebrow. "With all due respect, Admiral, why send us? This sounds like a job for the regular infantry."
The Admiral's lips quirked in a half-smile. Sharp as always, Orion. "The planet's unique properties make it a challenge for our standard forces. We need your team's adaptability and problem-solving skills." She tapped a control, and the hologram zoomed in to show atmospheric readings. Methox IV's atmosphere is primarily composed of methane. This presents unique challenges for our usual tactics and equipment. Ezra felt a thrill of excitement. This was why he loved being part of the super-heavy infantry. Every mission was a new puzzle to solve, a new challenge to overcome. He could see the same excitement reflected in his squad's eyes. "You have 3 days to prepare," Admiral Lyra continued. "I expect you to come up with solutions to the atmospheric problem, as well as any other issues you foresee. Remember, the eyes of Orion are upon you. Make us proud." As they filed out of the briefing room, Ezra's mind was already racing with possibilities. They had a planet to conquer, an alien race to subjugate, and a host of environmental challenges to overcome. Just another day for the Orion super-heavy infantry. The Orion battlecruiser Artemis Arrow cut through the void of space, its sleek hull gleaming under the light of distant stars. In the ship's tactical room, Captain Ezra Douglas and his squad pored over holographic displays of Methox IV, their target planet. "Something's not adding up," Private Lex Orion muttered, his brow furrowed as he swiped through atmospheric data. The soft blue glow of the holograms reflected off his cybernetic eye implant, a souvenir from a past mission gone sideways. Jazz Rigel leaned over his shoulder, her pink hair falling across her face. "What do you mean, Lex? Spit it out." Lex's fingers danced across the holographic interface, pulling up more detailed scans. "The methane content in the atmosphere. It's off the charts. I've never seen anything like it." Ezra felt a chill run down his spine. He'd learned to trust Lex's instincts. "Show me," he ordered, striding over to the display. As the team gathered around, Lex expanded the atmospheric composition chart. The methane levels were indeed staggering, comprising over 95% of the planet's atmosphere. Holy shit, Thomas Bellatrix whispered, his medical training immediately grasping the implications. How are the natives even surviving in that? Kira, serious, ever the pragmatist, cut to the chase. Forget the natives. How are we supposed to fight in that? Our standard equipment. She trailed off, but they all knew what she meant. Their laser rifles, designed to punch through the toughest armor, would be worse than useless in a methane-rich environment. Even their backup projectile weapons could spark a planetary conflagration. It gets worse, Lex added grimly. Look at the pressure readings. Ezra studied the numbers, his violet eyes widening. The atmospheric pressure on Methox IV was nearly triple that of their home planet. Their armor, while incredibly advanced, wasn't designed for such extremes. Well, Ezra said, a wry smile touching his lips, I guess this is why they sent us, and not the regular infantry. Jazz snorted. Yeah, lucky us. So what's the plan, Captain? How do we subjugate a planet we can't even safely land on? Ezra's mind raced, considering and discarding options. Lex, what about our dropships? Could we use them for insertion? Lex shook his head. No way, sir. The thrusters would ignite the atmosphere. We'd turn the whole planet into a fireball before we even touched down. A heavy silence fell over the room as the magnitude of their challenge sank in. They were the best of the best, the elite of Orion's military, but this was unprecedented. Suddenly, Kira's eyes lit up. What about the old ways at the team's confused looks? She continued, parachutes. We could drop from high orbit, use reinforced chutes to slow our descent. And for weapons, Thomas asked. A slow grin spread across Ezra's face. We go old school. Swords, maces, anything that won't create sparks or ignite the atmosphere. Jazz laughed, a sound of pure exhilaration. Oh, this is going to be fun. Imagine the looks on those aliens' faces when we come at them like knights from old Earth legends. Ezra nodded, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with a worthy challenge. All right, team, we've got work to do. Lex, I want you on suit modifications. We need to be able to withstand that pressure and filter that atmosphere. Jazz, you're on weapons detail. Find us the best non-spark options you can. Thomas, work with Lex on biological countermeasures. Kira, you're our parachute expert now. Figure out how to get us from orbit to ground safely. As his team sprang into action, Ezra allowed himself a moment of pride. This was why the Orion super heavy infantry was unmatched. In the face of impossible odds, they didn't just adapt, they thrived.
All right, Methox IV, he murmured to himself, staring at the holographic planet. Let's see what you've got.
The fabrication bay of the Artemis Arrow buzzed with frenetic energy. Sparks flew as Jazz Rigel, her face hidden behind a welding mask, worked on what looked like a massive broadsword. Nearby, Lex Orion's fingers danced across multiple holographic interfaces, fine-tuning the schematics for their suit modifications. Captain Ezra Douglas stood in the center of it all, his violet eyes taking in the organized chaos around him. Pride swelled in his chest as he watched his team work tirelessly to overcome the challenges posed by Methox IV. How are those suits coming along? Lex Ezra called out over the din of machinery. Lex looked up from his work, a manic grin on his face. You're gonna love this, Captain. I've reprogrammed the nanites in our armor's outer layer. They'll create a hyper-dense weave that can withstand the planet's atmospheric pressure. He pulled up a holographic display of the suit. See these new modules? They'll scrub the methane from the air, converting it to breathable oxygen. We'll be able to operate indefinitely on the surface. Ezra nodded approvingly. Excellent work. What about mobility? That atmosphere is going to be thick as soup. Already on it, Lex replied. I've boosted the suit's servos by 300%. We'll move like we're in standard gravity. From her workstation, Kira Sirius chimed in. Captain, you might want to see this. She gestured to a large, reinforced fabric spread out on the floor. Our new chutes. I've designed them to deploy in stages, allowing for a controlled descent through the dense atmosphere. Ezra ran a hand over the material, marveling at its strength. Impressive, serious. This'll get us planetside in one piece. Speaking of which, Thomas Bellatrix interjected, approaching with a handful of small devices. I've got something for that too. He held up one of the devices. Personal force field generators. They'll provide an extra layer of protection during our drop and in combat. Jazz, having finished her welding, lifted her mask and grinned. And once we're down there, we'll have these beauties to work with. She gestured to an array of medieval-looking weapons laid out on a nearby table. Swords, maces, war hammers, and even a few nasty-looking polearms gleamed under the bay's lights. I've fabricated them from a titanium carbide alloy, she explained. Lightweight but strong enough to crack alien skulls, and most importantly, they won't create sparks. Ezra picked up one of the swords, testing its balance. It felt right in his hand, a perfect extension of his arm. Nice work, Rigel. These'll do nicely. He turned to address his entire squad. All right, team. We've got 12 hours until we reach Methox IV. I want everyone to run full diagnostics on their modified suits and weapons. Drill with the new gear. When we drop, I need us operating like a well-oiled machine.
As his team scrambled to follow his orders, Ezra found himself staring out the bay's viewport at the stars streaking by. Somewhere out there was Methox IV, a world that had probably never seen anything like what was coming its way.
He allowed himself a small, fierce grin. The Orion super heavy infantry was bringing the past and the future together in one unstoppable package. Those methane-breathing aliens wouldn't know what hit them. Time to make history, Ezra murmured to himself, his grip tightening on the sword in his hand. The weight of it, so different from his usual high-tech weaponry, reminded him of the unique challenge they faced. But as he looked around at his team, Lex's technological wizardry, Jazz's deadly creations, Kira's life-saving innovations, and Thomas's protective ingenuity, he knew they were ready for anything Methox IV could throw at them. The drop bay of the Artemis Arrow was silent save for the soft hum of machinery and the rhythmic breathing of 5 super-heavy infantry soldiers. Captain Ezra Douglas stood at the edge of the open bay door, the void of space yawning before him. Methox IV loomed large in his view, a swirling mass of orange and red gases that seemed to glow ominously in the light of its star. Final systems check. Ezra's voice crackled over the squad's comms. One by one, his team sounded off. Orion, all green. Rigel, ready to rock. Bellatrix, systems nominal. Sirius, good to go. Ezra allowed himself a small smile beneath his helmet. All right, team, remember your training. Trust your gear. Trust each other. We're about to make Orion history. With a deep breath, he stepped off the edge and into the void. For a moment, there was nothing but the stomach-churning sensation of free fall and the vast, silent expanse of space. Then, one by one, his squad followed, their armored forms glinting in the starlight as they plummeted towards the alien world below. As they entered the upper atmosphere of Methox IV, the peaceful silence of space gave way to a deafening roar. The planet's thick, methane-rich atmosphere burned around them, turning their armored forms into falling stars. Outer temperature rising, Lex reported, his voice tense. Suit integrity holding at 98%. Ezra watched as the swirling gases of the atmosphere parted around him, revealing glimpses of the alien landscape below. Vast, rust-colored plains stretched as far as the eye could see, broken only by the occasional jutting spire of what looked like crystalline formations. First shoot deploy in 3, 2, 1. Mark Kira's voice cut through the comms. Ezra felt the first jerk as his primary chute deployed, slowing his descent from terminal velocity to merely terrifying. The thick atmosphere buffeted him, threatening to send him into an uncontrolled spin. Steady, team, he called out, fighting to maintain his orientation. Use your suit's gyros to stabilize. As they plummeted through the lower atmosphere, the true alien nature of Methox IV became apparent. The sky was a perpetual twilight, the methane haze filtering the starlight into an eerie, orange glow. Ezra's HUD lit up with warnings about the extreme pressure and toxic atmosphere outside his suit. Second shoot deploy in 5, 4. Kira began the countdown again. The jerk of the second shoot was even more violent than the first. Ezra grunted with the impact, watching as his descent speed dropped rapidly on his HUD. I've got visual on the target, Jazz's voice came through, excitement evident despite the tension. Looks like some kind of settlement about 2 clicks east of our landing zone. Ezra's eyes narrowed as he spotted it too, a collection of dome-like structures that seemed to pulse with an inner light. Copy that, Rigel. All units, prepare for final approach. Remember, weapons hot only once we're on the ground. We can't risk any sparks in this atmosphere. The ground rushed up to meet them with alarming speed. At the last moment, Ezra triggered his suit's landing protocols. Micro-thrusters fired, slowing his descent to a manageable level. He hit the ground with a bone-jarring thud, immediately dropping into a crouch and scanning the area. One by one, his team landed around him, each moving with the practiced precision that marked them as elite soldiers. As the dust settled, Ezra rose to his full height, the servo motors in his suit whining as they compensated for the increased gravity and pressure. Status report, he barked, unslinging the massive broadsword from his back. All systems green, Lex responded, his voice filled with a mix of relief and excitement. Suits are performing even better than expected. We're good to go, Captain. Ezra nodded, his eyes fixed on the alien settlement in the distance. All right, Orion super heavy infantry. We came here to do a job. Let's remind these methane breathers why Orion rules the stars. With a series of metallic clanks, his squad formed up around him, their medieval-style weapons at the ready. As one, they began to move towards the alien settlement, their heavy footfalls leaving deep imprints in the rust-colored soil of Methox IV. The rust-colored plains of Methox IV trembled under the heavy footfalls of Captain Ezra Douglas and his squad as they approached the alien settlement. The domed structures loomed larger now, their surfaces shimmering with an oily iridescence that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. Movement at 2 o'clock, Kira's voice crackled over the comms. Her enhanced vision modules were already proving their worth. Ezra raised a fist, bringing the squad to a halt. What are we looking at, Sirius? Bipedal, about 7 feet tall, looks like. Are those tentacles? As if on cue, a group of aliens emerged from behind one of the domes. They were indeed bipedal, with long, sinuous limbs that ended in what appeared to be 3-fingered hands. But where a human would have a face, these creatures had a mass of writhing tentacles. Well, Jazz quipped, her voice tight with anticipation, guess we know how they survive in this atmosphere now. Ezra tightened his grip on his sword. Remember, team. No projectiles, no energy weapons. We do this the old-fashioned way. The aliens had spotted them now. A high-pitched keening filled the air, vibrating through their suits despite the thick atmosphere. Suddenly, the creatures were moving, covering ground with alarming speed. Incoming, Thomas shouted, raising his mace. Ezra's world narrowed to the space immediately around him as the first alien reached him. He swung his sword in a wide arc, the servo motors in his suit amplifying the force of the blow. The blade connected with a satisfying thunk, cleaving through the alien's torso. But there was no time to celebrate. More were coming, their tentacles reaching out, trying to find weak points in the Orion armor. Jazz was a whirlwind of destruction, her twin short swords flashing in the eerie orange light as she cut down alien after alien. Lex, despite his usual role as tech support, was holding his own with a massive war hammer, each swing sending aliens flying. Kira had climbed atop one of the crystalline formations, using her elevated position to direct the team's movements. Captain, large group coming in from the east. At least 30 of them. Ezra grunted as he dispatched another alien, Bellatrix. Time to test out those area denial devices. Thomas didn't need to be told twice. He pulled a handful of small, spherical objects from his belt and tossed them towards the incoming horde. The devices hit the ground and immediately began to emit a high-frequency sonic pulse. The advancing aliens stumbled, their tentacles writhing in apparent agony. Nice work, Ezra commended, using the brief respite to assess the situation. They'd taken down at least 50 of the creatures, but more kept coming. The settlement was in an uproar now, with aliens pouring out of every structure. Lex, what's our suit status? Ezra called out as he parried a blow from a particularly large alien. Holding steady, Captain Lex replied, his voice strained as he fought off 2 aliens at once. Atmosphere scrubbers are working overtime, but we're good for at least another 6 hours. Ezra nodded, though he knew his team couldn't see it. All right, people. Time to end this. Sirius, you're our eyes. Direct us to their command center. Rigel, Orion, you're on point. Bellatrix, watch our 6. Let's move. The squad formed up, moving as one unstoppable unit towards the heart of the alien settlement. Their medieval weapons, coupled with their advanced armor, made them seem like knights of old, carving through the alien horde with ruthless efficiency. As they fought their way through the twisting pathways between the domed structures, Ezra couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. His team was performing flawlessly, adapting to this impossible situation as if they'd trained for it their entire lives. Finally, they reached what appeared to be the central structure, a massive dome easily twice the size of the others. "This is it," Ezra announced, his voice filled with grim determination. "Let's introduce ourselves to the leadership, shall we?" With a mighty kick, enhanced by his suit's powerful servos, Ezra smashed through the entrance. The team poured in, weapons at the ready, prepared for whatever alien horrors awaited them inside. The interior of the central dome was a riot of pulsating bioluminescence and strange, organic technology. At its center stood a group of aliens, larger and more ornate than the others they had fought. Their tentacles were adorned with intricate patterns that seemed to glow with an inner light. Captain Ezra Douglas raised his sword, ready for another fight. But to his surprise, the aliens made no move to attack. Instead, the largest of them stepped forward, its tentacles moving in what seemed to be a complex pattern. Captain Lex's voice came over the comm, a note of wonder in his tone. I think they're trying to communicate." Ezra hesitated, then slowly lowered his weapon. "Can you understand them?" Lex's fingers flew over his suit's interface, working on it. "Their language seems to be based on tentacle movements and bioluminescent pulses. Give me a moment to." "Got it." Suddenly, a series of clicks and whistles filled their comms, resolving into recognizable speech. ... Surrender. We surrender. Please, no more death." The squad exchanged shocked glances. This wasn't how they had expected the battle to end. Ezra stepped forward, his voice firm but not unkind. "We accept your surrender. In the name of the Orion civilization, this planet is now under our control." The alien leader's tentacles drooped in what seemed to be a gesture of resignation. "We underestimated you, sky breathers. Your adaptability is impressive." As Lex continued to translate, the alien explained that they had never encountered a species capable of surviving in their methane-rich atmosphere before. They had assumed their world was safe from outsiders. With the fighting over, the squad set about securing the settlement. The aliens, now docile in defeat, offered no resistance. Within hours, the Orion flag flew over the central dome, marking their victory. As the adrenaline of battle faded, Ezra gathered his team for a debriefing. They stood in a circle, their medieval weapons still in hand, a strange sight against the alien backdrop. "Outstanding work. Everyone," Ezra began, his chest swelling with pride. "We came, we saw, we conquered, and we did it without a single casualty on our side. The Orion brass is going to love this." Jazz grinned, twirling one of her short swords. "I gotta admit, Cap, swinging these babies was a lot more fun than I expected. Maybe we should make them standard issue." The team chuckled, the release of tension palpable. They had faced an impossible situation and come out on top. It was a victory for the ages. Thomas was the first to sober, his medical training kicking in. "We should probably think about heading back soon. Even with the suits, prolonged exposure to this atmosphere can't be good for us." Ezra nodded. "Agreed. Lex, call the ship and have them send down a shuttle for extraction. We'll leave a token force to maintain control until the regular troops arrive." There was a moment of silence. Then Lex cleared his throat, a note of embarrassment in his voice. Captain? We can't do that." Ezra frowned. "What do you mean, we can't do that?" "Well," Sir Lex explained, his voice growing smaller with each word, "remember how we realized that our ship's thrusters would ignite the atmosphere? That applies to shuttles too, and dropships, and, well, pretty much any of our vehicles." The implications hit Ezra like a physical blow. He looked around at his team, seeing the dawning realization on their faces. "Are you telling me," he said slowly, "that we have no way off this planet?" Lex nodded miserably. "Unless we can figure out a way to launch without using any kind of combustion. We're stuck here." The silence that followed was deafening. They had won the battle, conquered the planet, but in doing so, they had trapped themselves in a methane prison of their own making. Finally, Jazz broke the silence with a weak chuckle. "Well, Cap, looks like we get to test how long these suit scrubbers really last." Ezra looked out over the alien landscape, its orange sky suddenly seeming far more oppressive than before. They had overcome every obstacle, adapted to every challenge, but this was something else entirely. "All right, team," he said, squaring his shoulders. "Looks like we've got one more problem to solve. Let's get to work. The Orion super heavy infantry doesn't give up, no matter the odds." As his squad rallied around him, already beginning to brainstorm solutions, Ezra couldn't help but shake his head at the irony. They had come to subjugate a planet, only to find themselves prisoners of their own success. The real challenge, it seemed, was only just beginning. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you loved it. Please remember to subscribe if you did like it so you can see more videos like this. And please give us a like and a comment too. I'll see you in the next one.